Good morning, everyone. My name is Hala al Karib, and I'm the Regional Director of SIHA. I'm very pleased to be here, and I look forward to having this conversation with all of you. Just for those of you who doesn't know much about SIHA, SIHA is a regional network that works across the Greater Horn of Africa, and it was founded by a coalition of women activists from across the Horn of Africa region, and primarily actually from Somaliland. So it's such a fantastic occasion to have the opportunity to launch this paper virtually and to have the colleagues from Somaliland present as well. This is an extremely important and critical paper that comes in a critical time at this point of time. It's part of an effort that was carried by SIHA to provide and our colleagues, the women activists on the ground, to provide an up-to-date analysis of the dynamics of the women movements in Somaliland and the situation of gender relations. The finding and the analysis of this paper draw on SIHA network and our members and partners in Somaliland work and engagement with women rights activists and their organization for the past 20 years. The primary data of this paper was collected through interviews and focus groups, a discussion that was conducted earlier this year. And the report is one of the outputs from a project that we carried in partnership with Oxfam Novib, one of SIHA strategic partners and donors. The overall objective of the project is to promote women grassroots activism and to enhance their contribution to an inclusive peace and security process throughout the Horn of Africa. This paper briefly acknowledges the social and the political environment that surrounds the women movements in Somaliland. And this environment showed great signs of opening, as we all know, a few years back. And in 2018, of course, the sexual offenses bill, the SOP, was introduced, and there was great optimism about the ratification and the adoption of such an important bill for the women in Somaliland. However, we all are aware of the setbacks and the challenges that currently the women movements are facing. And at this difficult crossroad for the women movements in Somaliland, we believe that hopefully this paper will contribute to some of the discussion that you are having internally. Today, we are having actually a fantastic and great guest speakers who are going to highlight some of the findings and the recommendations that was developed and shared in our paper. Our first speaker that I'm going to introduce her bio right now is Hibo Adan Ahmed. She currently works at the women's as a women program manager for Action Aid Somalia, and she's also she was also worked as a legal aid lawyer, and she also worked as a gender specialist, and she carries a master's degree in human rights and development and project planning and management. And for more than 13 years, she has been working in Hargeisa to support women's rights. Our second speaker is Sarah Hassan. Sarah Hassan, she holds a degree in international studies, and she is very active as a peer leader throughout her university studies. And she also worked for the IRC and for the Academy for Peace and Development, and she is one of a new generations of Somaliland women rights activists. And lastly but not least, we have our own Asmahan Abdulsalam. Asmahan is one of the founders of SIHA. She also served as a chairperson of SIHA, and she's currently serving as an advisor to SIHA and the chairperson of Nagad Network. And she also served as a chairperson of the Somaliland Women's Research and Action Group, SORAG. And Asmahan has been part of the Somaliland women movement for over 30 years. Having those great speakers, we really hope that we are going to have a fantastic and honest conversations about the challenges that are facing women's rights in Somaliland at the moment. Before I move to my speakers and we start our conversation, a few housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. Everyone's microphone are muted and video except for the speaker and the moderator. Please send your questions to the chat box and it will be reviewed by SIHA team, and it will be shared with the moderator, and then we will direct your question to the speakers. I kindly ask you to focus your questions on the topic of the webinar to receive the feedback and engage with the speaker. So my first questions goes to Asmahan Abdulsalam. And Asmahan, one of the findings of the paper that Somaliland has a strong foundation for a vibrant and influential women movement. And there are a great number of women entrepreneurs in Somaliland, small business owners, traders, vendors, and so on. So my question is, how do you feel about the current situation of the women movement in Somaliland? And what are your worries and concerns as a long-term activist about the current situation of the women movement, and what can be done in your view to strengthen the movement? Asmahan, you have 5 minutes to respond to this question. Go ahead.
Your voice after a long time. In fact, I have a mixed feeling about the current situation of women's movement in Somaliland.
I cannot hear.
You cannot hear. Okay. Thank you, Hala, for introducing us.
I'm afraid we cannot hear you, Asmahan. And if you can move to the center so we can see you. Yes. Assalamu alaikum. We can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Hello, could you hear me, Hala? Could you hear me now?
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Could you hear me now, Hala?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. Okay. It's nice seeing your face and your smile after a long time. Hi, everybody. And if I try to answer your question, in fact, I have a mixed feeling about the current situation of the women movement in Somaliland. First of all, I have a feeling of satisfaction that our hard work and efforts in have created this movement has borne fruit. And I can see how the movement has broadened its space from the grassroots level, where we have thousands of self-help groups and women street vendors who are becoming active agents in changing their situation and becoming part of the wider women's human rights movement. Uh, on the other hand, we also see a younger generation of educated youth engaging in different public life according to their different professions. And though we still lack the commitment in taking urgent joint actions to respond to common challenges facing women, and this needs some time to overcome. On the other hand, my worries and concerns are about the challenge that women are facing when it comes to political participation. And most of these challenges are coming from the hardline religious leaders. The quota system, for example, for women in parliament and local council was annulled partly because of the row created by those so-called religious leaders who spearheaded their opposition to the quota as falsely being anti-Islamic. This message has fallen into the ears of the common public, who usually rely on those religious leaders on matters concerning their religion. The discrimination against women in this patriarchal society is also another factor that hinders women's advancement in all spheres of life. These are the challenges I oversee and worries, but we hope we will overcome them, on time as time passes.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Asmahan. Thank you so much for giving feedback, to the question, and thank you for being on time. I am going to direct my second question to Hibo. And Hibo, one of the recommendations of the paper that it clearly stated that it's very important to enable the conversations between women and young women in Somaliland and youth as well, youth males. So women, youth males and females, to encourage their effort to challenge, as Asmahan just said, and address the whole issue of militant Islamic based discourse that's currently dominating the conversation when it comes to issues of women's rights, and which is significantly slowed the progress of addressing women fundamental rights in Somaliland. So my question to you, Hibo, as an activist and as a lawyer, do you think that the women movement has done enough, first in engaging young women and in engaging young men, and second in addressing the growing influence of the militant groups and its impact on women? And what is the way forward in your view? Hibo, you have 5 minutes.
Yes.
Could you hear me, Helen?
Yes, I can hear you now. I can hear you now. Yeah.
Sorry.
Uh,
If I try to go back what I have said, and I want to start the history and the effort women did since 1991 when Somaliland claimed their independence and sovereignty. Women, they tried different approaches and efforts to realize their rights and to get their participation in decision making. So women, they fail to get the attention and appreciation of the traditional leaders and other groups who have a power in the country. And after that, they try to mobilize men and women, especially the young age or middle age, to convince their idea, women political participation, or in general, women leadership participation and exercising their constitutional rights. So after that, still after 29 or 30 years, women are not get their portion and their rights in the decision making and other levels in the country structure, especially when it comes to executive, legislative, and also the judiciary system. And after that, women, they come up different other approaches, which is we thought will make a more fruit when we compare the previous one. That one was to to take a target and engage the young middle and group, especially boys and girls in the university and also in educated age. So still that approach not make a big difference. Although what we see last 5 or 7 years, we have a difference when we compare the last time when the parliament, it was 2007 or 2005, we are running in those positions. So in conclusion, and what is the way forward in and when it comes how the women pass and break these barriers which puts in culture, because in Somaliland laws, especially the constitution and national gender policy and other laws, we have a full rights and respects. But the problem is how can we exercise that rights when it comes in the ground and the reality. So the way forward, in my opinion, is three options. The first option is women in power and other women, women engagement, because currently 65% or more than half Somaliland population, they are women. So we need to empower women to vote, women to support, women to stand by women. Secondly is education. Although we make a lot of improvement in the side of education when you compare to previously, but still we need specific educations like how we make campaigns and also legal education, all that. The third point I have is money. We need money, how to improve our income as women to support each other. So I have that 3 points when it comes to the way forward. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much, Hipu. Thank you for pointing out to those critical issues, and speaking about the importance of education, the importance of women access to resources, and then for stressing, the fact that Somaliland has an inclusive constitution and it should respond to the majority of population, and the fact that women are majority of Somaliland population, and for the country to develop, that the state need to observe the human rights of women. And I think what you said and what Asmahan has said earlier is the fact that women rights are national issues. They are not international issue is not about the donors as much as it's about the national agenda of the state. And that's something that's really very important, this approach to adopt, I think, in this part of the world, is to start to own our issues and to control how do we want to address it and to control our priorities. My second question is to Zahra. And Zahra, you are very much part of a new generation of young women activists in Somaliland. And of course, you inherited also many, many battles that the women in Somaliland has been fighting for the past over 30 years, political participations, inclusion of women, adoptions of women rights, and including the whole issue of the sexual offense bills and the women participation in decision making and so on. So my question is to you, how do you see, young people involved, in these battles, and what needs to be done, by your generations to push the women movement forward? And you have 5 minutes, Zahra. I cannot hear you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm speaking through my mask, so I hope this is fine. Talking about what can be done better, especially in two specific bills that Naga is also working on, in terms of the sexual offenses bill, the 2020 sexual offenses bill, as well as the women's quota bill. I think it's important to notice and highlight the work, the incredible work, I should say, the incredible work that CSOs. I've been told people can hear me. What's your name again? Yeah. This is fine, Hala, right? We're having some technical issues. I was saying that it's important to highlight the incredible work that CSOs have done and the investment that they have put in putting together a legislation or a law, the 2018 Sexual Offenses Bill that has really gained a lot of recognition internationally for how just and equitable that law is, and how and the fact that the law was in favor, as it should have been, and supportive of victims and survivors of rape, instead of allowing perpetrators and future offenders to get away with such crimes like this new law, the 2020 Sexual Offenses Law, is doing. After mentioning the incredible work CSOs has done, especially Nagat being here as well, it's also important to mention that there are some specific stakeholders, for example, religious leaders and clerks, that feel like they could have been engaged and they could have been given a more role to participate in the making of the law. So in kind of banning this new law or amending it, there needs to be more involvement and more engagement of religious leaders, as we have seen that they have incredible influence over the lawmaking process in the country. And I'm still speaking about sexual offenses bill. It has been clear to me in a lot of meetings that I have attended that there are a lot of CSOs and the general public honestly lack a great deal of knowledge about this bill and some of the articles in this bill and some of the provisions in this bill that could bring a lot of harm to a lot of Somali women and young boys who also are victims of rape. So there needs to be like more public education about the bill in itself, and more campaigns and like mass movements by the people. So legislators and lawmakers feel like they need and they are like required to put together a bill that truly is like just and equal and does protect the rights of women and just in general victims of rape. In terms of what young people can do to participate in the process of like lawmaking in the country or like politics in general or like just being part of like public office, I think a lot of girls, I would say, have the qualifications to be leaders in like the offices of ministry and like be like legislators and be in really places where political decision making is made. Um, so we just need to basically just show that we are capable of leading the country and that we also deserve opportunities and to do so. And on the legal side, I think the government needs to make a clear commitment to allow women to participate in politics. For example, the quota bill is like one way to do so. Our neighbor, Rwanda, has done an incredible job making sure that there's women in leadership places. So we need more commitment from the government side. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Zahra. Thank you for raising such an important issue. And I know that you have talked about the importance of engaging with religion and the importance of for women not to assume authority of discussing and debating, their rights and equality within the Islamic religion framework, and to open conversations with traditional religious leaders and sort of to negotiate for their rights. And that's really an important issue that we have been talking about in SIHA for a while, that it's critical for the women movements to start gaining authority and discussing their rights within an Islamic religion framework. And of course that requires a lot of education and learning, but I think we are in a position and in a place that we are able to collect this knowledge. Also, I know that you talked about the importance of having young people involved in political institutions to have influence in decision making, and I think that's really very, very important. And I think, as you said, the sexual offense bill is a great opportunity to continue working on pushing for the document forward and in creating more discussion and negotiations around it. My second question goes to Asmahan. And Asmahan, this paper has talked about the fact that Somaliland women and the women in Somaliland, I let you settle, Asmahan. Yeah. Yeah, so it talked about the fact that the women in Somaliland has played a crucial role in the peace and stability of the country, and this is very, very important. Have sacrificed a lot, for the stability of Somaliland. And that's really an important role and critical role. So it will be great if you talk to us a little bit about the historical context of that. And you have 5 minutes. I cannot hear you again. Something happened.
Yes, go ahead now.
Okay.
Now I can hear you.
Yeah, women in Somaliland have suffered a lot, and during the civil war, they bore the brunt of the wars. They were combatants. Some of them were combatants in the war and took part in the war and lost their lives. Some of them worked as providing medical aid to the combatants. Some of them, also were systematically raped to humiliate in combating or warring factions. Some of them lost their husbands, their sons, their brothers, their close relatives, and had to bear all this, in the brunt of. Some of them were forcibly evicted from their homes and were forced to exile, to take part in exile in refugee camps in Ethiopia, eastern Ethiopia. Some of them were even bombarded and lost their lives while fleeing the fighting in Hargeisa, bombardments, and even during in the way to the border. So bearing this all in mind, when the war cessed and people started to come back to Somaliland, women were the first people to provide aid to to this devastated country, Somaliland, and had destroyed Somaliland. Somalia has destroyed our infrastructure, and Hargeisa was totally in rubble in 1991, as I also witnessed this fleeing the war in Mogadishu. So women were the first people to gather in their efforts to clear up the city, and to do something for the people who were coming back, and everywhere was mined. So this was the situation. This was the situation in 1991 when women and children came back, from the refugee camps in eastern Ethiopia. So women, try to, do what they can, and they organize themselves in small groups. They had no concept totally about the work of NGOs, but it was their own effort, and individual efforts to clean up the city. They were, in a dire situation for peace and to settle back in their city, whether it was, even under a tree, because all their houses were demolished. Everything has been looted. So this was the situation of women, and they took the responsibility of this. When the government, when the Somaliland declared its secession from Somalia in 1991 in May, there were, a reconciliation, process that took place, and that was, what now Somaliland is praised, because of the bottom-up, reconciliation process that brought all the Somaliland clans together to sit together and talk about peace and reconciliation. And women were part of this. And though they were not, sitting at the negotiation table, as you know, women are not allowed, African women are not allowed to do that, but they were working behind the curtain, negotiating, mediating between the clans, to take peace, because everybody was fed up with war. They wanted, in peace and stability at last in Somaliland. So when in the first reconciliation process started in 1993 in Boroma, women were actively engaged in the logistics, in bringing the clan elders together. Sometimes it happened even the clans could just, get fed up and try, to go back, but they were insisting on the clans, because they were born from one clan and married to the other clan. So they were, thinking about what about our children? What about the destiny of our, people? We were suffering all these years in refugee camps. So please come back and settle. And we are not, going back to the refugee camps. We have to die here. So at last, finally, the peace was installed and the negotiations and reconciliation at that in Borama, and conference was, being made or realized. But unfortunately, women were not part of that, negotiation. So it was, a consensus meeting and a consensus reconciliation and a clan-based system of governance was then formed at that time. And of course, women were not part of that. But they told them, okay, when we move to political parties and multi-party system and democratization, then you will be part of that. And we make a constitution and all this. Then women accepted that, but they didn't know that that would not even be realized. So when in the first draft of the constitution was, being, drafted, women were neglected and were not, included even in the first draft to take part and put their comments into the constitution. That's why now every time we ask for a quota, they say it is unconstitutional because they don't even, say why it is not unconstitutional because we were not there at the table when at the drafting, in moments of the constitution, we would have put our input, to have or spare a quota for women, since they cannot, come out and, by voting because, of the, clan system and clan affiliation in Somaliland. That's why where the whole problem of saying everything is unconstitutional started from that point. Then, okay, women and just, took the peace and tried to that in government to continue and with its work until the multi-party system was installed. And after the multi-party system was installed, and then Nagad at that time, we said we will form our own party, our women party. And then they said, no, the constitution does not allow us, a women party or Islamic party and all this. You have to join the other parties. And first they were organizations before they moved to parties. And then we negotiated with the political organizations. And what would you give us if we, side with you and join your organization? So, and every, organizational, political organization said, okay, we will think about that when we, proceed to a political party. But one political organization said, we will give you 50%, 50-50. Okay, then we joined that political organization, but in their first General Assembly a meeting in Borough, instead of, they said they promised 50-50, instead of making the chairperson of the political as organization a man, and then we should have then the vice chair as a woman. They neglected us and gave also the vice chair to a man. That's when we, moved from that, and and we were very much disappointed, and then we went and also decided to go out of that party. But then we convened all the women. We told them, okay, join every party. Don't stay in one party, but join every party and try to work for women's issues in the party, and also to promote yourselves to come out as women groups. In that first election, it was a local government election, local councils election, and women were put at the end of the list of the candidates of the party. So the first, for example, the first list of, if I say of one of the party, when we saw it, it was the 18th number that the women were first women, all the rest were men. So how can a party get 18, candidates or seats? So that was, when we, and also that disappointment began. Up till that, now we were advocating for, being of the party, but all this, was in vain. Then what we decided was also because of the peace and stability, we have to continue raising the awareness of women. We have to continue to advocate for, seats. We have to educate our women and give them, political awareness. And up to now, that's what's going on. And women are, very much concerned about the peace and stability. And that's why we are, you are taking every hardship because of the peace and stability in Somaliland.
Thank you so much, Ismahan, for this, fantastic lesson. And I'd like to congratulate you and congratulate, your colleagues and your sisters for enduring, such a long battle for equality and for justice for women. And while you were talking and I'm listening to you, and I was thinking, what a fantastic, accounts and what a fantastic struggle that the women in Somaliland has gone through. It's heroic. It's definitely worth documentation, and it's something that's very important for the younger generation to learn about and to understand exactly where you come from and your capacity to endure, your capacity to negotiate consistently, with the political institution, with the patriarchal institutions, for some sharing of access, to decision making, access to resources, and so on. So I absolutely congratulate you. Your struggle is 100% recognized and appreciated and seen. But I think it's really important to document it. It's very important, for the pioneer women leaders in Somaliland to document their struggle and to start sharing it with the younger generation, because this is very, very important. And not only in Somaliland, when you're talking about, what happened to the women movements and how many times they had to negotiate with the political institutions and how many times they have been deceived and they have been manipulated, I cannot help it thinking about women across this region. It happened right now. It happened to women in my own country in Sudan, the same scenario. It happened before to the women in Ethiopia, and it happens to the women movements in different parts of this region. And what I really appreciate, and I think it's very important for us to take with us, is you're doing that, but you're also having in mind, the stability of the country, and you prioritize that all the time in your struggle. But also you mentioned something very important. You talked about the critical role, which is, I think it's also very important to be documented, that Somaliland women has played in rebuilding the country. And that's also something that needs to be recognized. So thank you very much for this lesson, Asmaham. I really appreciate it, and I think we take this recommendation forward. So my other question is to Hibu, and in your role as in your view as a lawyer and as a women activist, do you think that women professional associations, which we saw, I give you a minute to settle, people, yeah, which we saw there is many of them in Somaliland, and it's such a fantastic phenomena. Women entrepreneurs groups, women midwives, the street vendors. So how do you see those women becoming part of the women movements? And do you see that they really have a role to play within the women movement? Go ahead, Hibo, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, Hala. This question is very important. When it comes to women professional associations and their role in Somaliland context, especially women, they have a very important role. Since after civil wars, women, they are the first breadwinner of the families. And like 75% or 70% of the families in Somaliland, they depend on the income of women wherever she lives, or maybe she lives in Somaliland or abroad. So women can play important role, especially professional associations like midwiferys, journalists, lawyers, entrepreneurships, and other professional associations. And they will play like, and they show and they break the cultural beliefs and myths, because in Somali culture they believe women cannot do anything, so they break that belief and they show the community women will change and participate in the peace and development of the country. And the other important they are playing is they become a role model as a young girls in primary and intermediate and high school in the country. Because when the girls have role models, they have a 50% of the answer in the questions they are asking herself. And the third thing is women will support other women, especially when it comes like lawyers. We have a lot of domestic violence, GBV, and violence against women in the country. So if we don't have lawyers and female prosecutors, we can't realize the rights of those victims. And I remember the time I joined the law field, we don't have, or we had a limit female in that sector. So the number of the domestic violence and how the mothers who have a domestic problems miss their rights were very high when we compare now. When it comes to midwiferys and female health professions, they do a lot of things, especially women festival survivors. If they don't have women female health supporters, they can't present their problems into the hospitals. And when it comes, they're important. The information is a power now. So they have a lot of information in those professional associations. When they combine all that information, they will play an important role to control this country. And the last one is income. So when it's clearly they have an income. So women, at the time women have income, they have a power. So in general, if I summarize, those women professional associations, they have a power and also more support and fun. And when it comes to opportunities to expand and strengthen networks and chains of support, nowadays we have very good important opportunities, and especially if I summarize 2 points. And we have a young girl initiatives in country, especially the girls who graduate the different universities. Like they establish reading and experience sharing platforms like Hubwadak and Forum, Ubah Center, and SLAT initiatives. All those initiatives, they start to empower young girls in the universities, and they start to build the capacity and moral and attitude of the women. They make role models, and also even the facilitators and all those things. And the other opportunity we have now, last year, is womenhood approach. Womenhood approach is a very important approach. Women can stand to support each other and break these cultural barriers and realize their right to exercise their rights and eliminate the GBV and SGBV in the country. So we have that two opportunity, because women issue and women rights are human rights and it's a national rights. It's not good to wait the international community. We need to stand ourselves to make safe environment where young girls and women have a safe to share their experience and get information and support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hibu. Thank you for covering all the issues and the next question as well. So, sorry, Sahara, I think Hibu has answered more or less. But if you have extra comments, I'll come back to you more about if we have time, about the role of young women. But from what I heard from Hibu, you talked about an inclusive women movement, and you talked about a women movement that's inclusive of all of women of all backgrounds. And as you said about the role of the how it's really important to have those agenda as part of the national agenda, and to connect them to the country development, to the country peace and stability, as Mahan said, and to reflect on the struggle of the women on our demand and our agenda. If you have, if women are contributing to rebuilding the country, literally, it's really critical and important for them to have access to their rights and to justice. I'd like to call on, representative from our strategic partners, Oxfam Novib, Mr. Shamak, who is available, I believe, just to speak to us a little bit about the commitment of Oxfam to the solidarity and to the support of women's rights in Somaliland. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you. Is he around? I cannot hear you.
I think you can hear me now.
I can hear you now. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Yeah.
As Oxfam Novib, we have so many interventions regarding on gender and women empowerment. And we have started work in Somaliland close to 40 years before Somali government has been collapsed, but quickly returned after 1992. And from now onwards, we have quite many interventions. We are fully committed to continue, and one of our core values are just gender empowerment and women empowerment in general. For the last interventions, we were quietly working on quota, agenda, and women political participation in general. We have conducted quite many research related on women participation, gender gap, including this one. So we are fully committed to continue working with existing women movements and other platforms existing in Somaliland. Although there's quite many challenges ahead of us, but still there's a long way to go. And that challenge will be overcome, that we will collectively work with civil society and at largely working closely with citizens who will understand, and at the end understand the value that women will contribute to the lives of the country and the development and prosperity of the country income. But notably, as our democracy and structures of our government existing in Somaliland are mainly on clan-based, dominant clan-based structures, which is hybrid to democracy, which has limited its base for both youth and women. We still continue fighting with that and get viable policies that can at least help and women to be part and parcel of the decision-making spheres of the country. You can see that now we have challenges with quota system to bear profit. Government and other oppositions are not yet fully committed. We have challenges with existing and other laws in Somaliland which is not gender sensitive. Sexual offences bill has not gone through as it was initially developed. Some change has been made by the government or any other groups which are mistranslating religious translations. So we have those challenges ahead of us. And the only thing that will continue will be is still strengthen and continue working and exist those movements who are now existing and try to engage other young professional females who are graduates from local universities to incorporate with those movements and at least finally reach with citizens at large to make them understand on the contribution and the importance of women to be part and parcel of the community system. So in that regard, we are fully committed to continue working with gender empowerment and working closely with existing platforms in Somaliland. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shamak. And it's really excellent to hear about Oxfam Novib, commitment, which is something that we have experienced, and as strategic partners and, as partners who stand in solidarity with the women movement for years in Somaliland and across the region. We don't have much time left. But we have a few minutes for questions. So I'm not sure if anyone has a burning questions to one of the speakers. Please do share it before we move forward and conclude on our webinar. I was told that there are 2 questions. So there is a question to Asmahan, and Asmahan, the question is said that you mentioned that one of the challenges and concerns is how of low women political participations is and you spoke about that. So what was the role of the women movement, in supporting women political participations under the current circumstances? And they are specifically asking that there is only one woman currently in the House of Representatives. How did she navigate the patriarchal system, being the only woman, and to what extent the women movement has been supportive of this woman? Asmahan, do you want to respond to this question?
Yes. In fact, the only woman in the House of Representatives was not, elected. It came by consensus because in the eastern regions of Somalia at that time, there were, this is a disputed area between Puntland and Somaliland, and there were no elections at that particular area. So she just came by consensus and something which is called by, in Somali is hambar. They could understand it that, by consensus. But there was another woman who unfortunately left, the parliament. That woman competed and succeeded to get a seat. She was elected from our region, and she successfully, got a seat. But unfortunately, after some time, because of, family problems, she left the house. And in fact, when I come back to how women are, supporting women, it's a very difficult question because of the clan affiliation, and unfortunately, I'm saying this, women are not supporting women. Women are not voting for women. If women were voting for women, we would have now had half of the House of Representatives or the local council as women, because women are the majority of the population of Somaliland. But women are not supporting women. But this time women pledged to vote for women because they saw that the men they voted for haven't done anything for women. They haven't supported their constituencies. They haven't supported women. So this time we hope that women will vote for women because of the awareness we are doing as Nagat Network and other women activists, young activists, and all women, because this time, since the quota has been annulled, we are committed and challenging all these male-dominated houses to show them that we can bring women into the parliament, and that is a pledge from all women.
Thank you very much, Ismahan. There is one other questions I'm going to share with the panelists, and you can choose who's going to answer it. And then I will give the opportunity to Nafisa to speak for 3 minutes before we conclude. Nafisa is the director of Nagat. So the question, I think, in my view, it's very important. Which is there is about 54% of girls between the age of 15 and 24 are out of school at the moment. And there is a high rates of unemployment and access to resources. So basically, they are asking, how could this paper or the launch of this paper support on this? One of the recommendations, that we talked about on the paper, and I'm going also to give the opportunity to panelists, and one of the things that SIHA has been talking about is how we can expand the concept of women, peace, and security. And women, peace, and security is not only about selective women who are going to be seated around the table, but it's also about women access to education, women access to development, women access to health services, and it's also about violence against women policies and social protection policies, because we cannot talk about peace and security, and we cannot talk about safe environment without addressing those policies. And I think what SIHA and the colleagues, the panelists here, and the women movement, what we are trying to do, we are trying to influence and change the conversations. And as I said, to make this conversation a national conversation and not an outsider's conversations. And this is very, very, very important at this point of time, because the only mean and tool we have is we have our capacity to negotiate, and that's the only way, and we have our civil activism to push things forward. This is my feedback to the question. I don't know if any of the panelists, they have any response to girls' access to education, that there is large number of girls in Somaliland, they have no access to education, and the unemployment rates of younger women. If anyone would like to add.
Yeah, thank you, Hala. I'm glad to see you again. The girls' education since
Thank you, Nafisa. How are you?
yeah, I'm good. How are you? There is a lot of improvement when it comes to 90s, the education of girls. But our last gender gap that we launched on March 2019, it emphasizes 4 areas: education for girls, women's political participation, women's economic empowerment, and women's economic participation. the four areas that the report emphasizes, it seems zero level. But when it comes to the starting education for girls, by the time that the family send the school only boys rather than girls, it's a lot of change. And now when you have seen the elementary, primary and secondary school, and also the higher education, the university's class is like 70 students, maybe 50 or 45 are girls. So somehow you can see there is a lot of improvement, but when it comes to the reports, the UNICEF report, the gender gap report, you can still see there is a gap in education and also in other sector areas for women. Thank you. I think if they can add Michael.
Yeah, as Nafisa has said, girls' education have improved a lot, and girls are going to school. It's not as like, you know, in the report of, I remember, UNICEF report of 1998, it was 37% in the primary education enrollment for girls. And that's no longer the case, because girls and boys are going to school on equal basis, but there is the dropout, the dropout rate of girls dropping from, when they reach the secondary school and also not continue the university is the problem. The dropout problem is, related either to early marriage, either to families that could not pay for school fees, and for many other reasons. But it's improving. And as to in getting going to the universities, because of the fee is so high, many low-income families cannot afford to send their girls to the university. And as Nagat, we had in 2013, and we had a program for fellowship for in young girls from poor families from Oxfam Novi, and we managed to sponsor and many girls to go and complete their in higher education, particularly in Hargeisa University. And we have to stop that, though the project has concluded, but we are researching other channels to continue to sponsor young ladies who cannot pay for this in high fees to continue their higher education. And when it comes to employment, it is a general phenomenon because of the recession all over the world, and also in Somaliland, and particularly in this COVID-19. There is the employment is very the rate of employment is very low, both for boys and girls, and the country is going also in an economic recession like other countries in the world. But things are improving for girls, not like before.
Thank you, Asmahan. But while I have you, there is another question for you, which is, what is the role of the women movement, or what the role the women movement is playing in, in the whole issue of peace and security and youth recruitment, into act as mercenaries and part of conflicts and participate in conflicts, which is apparently, this is connected to the first questions. It's connected to issue of employment, youth employment, and also the militarization of young people in Somaliland.
In fact, and as I said before, peace and security is, the best priority for the whole society, and particularly for women. So And we are, preserving this fragile peace. Sometimes there are skirmishes of, fighting between clans, particularly in the eastern region. And what we do as a Nagat network and the movement, we send, in groups or committees of women to, mediate between the warring factions. And in fact, this war has brought, a standstill to some of the schools were closed, and children could not go to school or attend school together because of this, horrible, clan faction in war and going on. So maintaining this is very important. And there are, even community policing, and women are, very able and, alert to, look for insurgents and look for, anything disturbing this fragile peace, and they automatically report to the police and to the nearest police station. So we are all together, in working to maintain this fragile peace, and that could, be lead to the stability of the whole of Somaliland. So that's what's going on, for maintaining and building peace.
I totally agree with you. The militarizations definitely is something that's absolutely negative, and it has a long-term implication on the safety and security of women. It has a long-term implications on, on peace and security of the country. So there is a question to Oxfam Novib representative, and the question is, what what's the role of Oxfam Novib in supporting, the Somaliland women movement to push for the sexual offense bill? Okay, and what will happen, and to what extent Oxfam Novib is committed against the consistent resistance, from adoption or from adopting laws and bills that support women rights in Somaliland? Does Oxfam Novib has a very specific vision or strategy? Yeah, thank you.
Hi. I think our role is quite clear. We are fully supporting to have all laws and rules and policies that support women to be in place in the government, and we will be fully supporting that. And some of our interventions now that we always support and creating an enabling environment where women will fully and joyfully participate all different levels of decision making and political participation at large. Secondly, what was the second question? And I think that in that regard, our commitment is quite clear. Although I've missed your questions, can you repeat the second part of your question?
That Oxfam Novib has specific strategies to continue supporting the women movement in Somaliland, despite the fact that there is ongoing resentments, from in terms of changing laws and policies that supports women rights in Somaliland. What kind of strategies Oxfam Novib is looking for? And I guess, in relation also to partnership with civil society.
Actually, as an Oxfam Novib now, we have developed our strategy starting from 2021 and onwards up to 2030. We have 10 years strategy, basically based on 4 different pillars. The first pillar is just inclusive governance, inclusive civic expression, which is gender empowerment. So we have our priority from starting now that women empowerment and gender empowerment as large will be our priority. We'll be investing and continue investing, doing globally and regionally and including at country level. That Oxfam as its strategy to invest and have women to be empowered and be part and parcel of the structures and government structures of the country. So in that regard, our commitment is quite clear. Although we have gaps in terms of funding, but still trying to find out some sort of funding that we can keep continue supporting gender empowerment. So we have in place our strategies, and our priority is just to work and build the capacity of civil society and have policies in place that help gender women to be part and parcel of the decision making of the country.
Very much. I have a fifth questions from the audience, and it's directed to the panelists and Asmahan. So the question is, if we put our efforts towards realizing or the importance of women voting for other women, could this mean the marginalizations of men, or men they feel unsupported? I find these questions a little bit insensitive, considering the fact that we are having a majority, not a majority, a dominant male. Yeah.
Yeah,
I let you answer.
Yeah, when we are saying women vote for women, it doesn't mean that all women vote for women, and that is not possible, because there are women where their husbands are running for the election as candidates, their sons are running, their relatives are running. But what we were used to do, and when we were raising the awareness, we said, for example, in our families, we have large families of 10 or more in the family. So we were telling them, if only 2 out of the 10, persons of the family vote for women, women will come out. And the rest, the 10, the 8, let them vote for women. So it doesn't mean that we are leaving men. Men are, our partners. Most women are our allies. We are trying to jointly build this society, on equality, not, discriminating against men. That will not, of course, happen. But men should also consider voting for women. They should consider voting for women, because it's only very, very, a small, percentage of men used to vote for women. But we are urging men also to vote for women, so that we can have, equity between men and women. We can have a just society that both men and women are working in joining hands for the progress of Somaliland.
And Asmahan, just while I have you there is a question. Why did you stress that often women, they don't support women? This is a question also from the audience.
This is because of clan affiliation, particularly at the grassroots level. The clan and tradition is very strong, and they feel that a clan should be represented by a male, a candidate, and not a female candidate. And they think that is an insult that a clan is represented by a female candidate. That's the reason, why, and we are saying they should vote for also women. They are part of the family. They are part of the, in clan. Clans are all, not only all men, and girls are also part of the clan. And they belong to 2 clans. The clan of their, paternal, paternal clan, and also the clan of their children. So they are torn between these 2 clans, and that's why they say women have no clan and nobody is giving them support when it comes to political participation. But what we are saying is that, and we are urging and doing our awareness at the grassroots level that, they should forget about this clan affiliation and vote for any person, be it a man or a woman, who will do something for the constituency, who would, alleviate poverty of the constituency and the clan. and not only just because, because of the patriarchal structure that, the man should lead, that they, vote for men, because they have already seen that men haven't brought anything back into the clan when they, got the, the seat. They never get back to their constituencies. They never do anything for it. They just sit there, and forget about who voted for them and close the doors against them and shut the doors. They don't open doors for their, voters again. So this time, women are swearing that.
And Asmahan, there is another question, which is, I think it's very, very important question. And it's basically speaks about, and maybe yourself can have an input, and maybe the other panelists, Hibu or Sarah, if they have any contributions. But the question is, what's the role of the women movement advocating for girls' education? And I really think the points you have mentioned, it's really critical that, despite the high intake, we often don't pay attention to the dropout that happens down the road. And this is where the biggest problem is, that girls' education is not financially or economically budgeted for sufficiently to sustain and to retain girls in schools. So I let you answer that question. Like, what's the agenda of the Somaliland women movement when it comes to girls staying in school?
As I said before, one of the priorities for us at the higher education is that in all girls who could afford to go to these universities could go, and we assist those we can assist, to continue their education. But when it comes to staying in the lower classes, in the lower stages, primary and also the secondary level, it needs a lot of awareness from the families, and that they should stop this early marriage. Early marriage is one of the reasons why girls are dropping out of school, and it's one and the main reason why when they get to secondary, and they feel that the family could not sustain a lot of children going into school. They just say, okay, let the boy go to school, and the girl should get married. So this is an awareness raising campaign that is going on and on and on, and maybe in the end it will bear fruit, because and families are realizing what girls are doing for their families. They are the ones who are funding their families. Even in the diaspora, it is the women or the girls who went into diaspora who are sending back remittance to the families, and not the boys. I'm not saying all the boys, but mostly, and the majority of the in remittance are sent by female in the diaspora. So it should be made clear that we don't discriminate, and we shouldn't discriminate against our children on gender based, on be it a boy or a girl. We should send them together to school. We should try to see who would, they will all benefit, and not discriminate against the girls and keep them back from school.
Thank you, Asmahan. Can I ask the other panelists, Sahra and Hibu, if they have any input or addition? Yes.
Thank you, Ismahan. Just I want to add a small points. Women movement can play important role when it comes to girl education dropout, and we need to mention first the reasons which caused mostly the girl education dropout. The first is a culture, which promotes the FGM and early marriage. Second is a lack of role models, because if the girls they have a role models, they refuse to quit and cancel their educations. And the third thing is most of the schools they are not a suitable environment which support the needs of girl, like toilets and other needs girls they need. And the fourth point is a financial issue, which resulted in most of the girls, especially when they reach the high school and university, they quit their education. So women movement will make awareness against the barriers of culture which research and promote the girl education like early marriage, FGM, and other issues, and they make schools a suitable environment while young girls can feel safe, happy, and live their life suitable. And even the women movement, they support young girls and the side of money, they make scholarships and sponsorships. And they make mentors, female mentors, which support young girls psychosocially and also moral support.
Thank you very much, Hibu. And while I have you here, there is a question that I think it's basically for you. And the question is about why Somaliland does not have women judges up to date. And is there any agenda to mobilize for having women judges in Somaliland?
Yes, it's a very good question. In Somaliland, the problem, we have a lot of female law graduates from the different schools, and also we have a lot of lawyers and also female prosecutors. Although we got that female prosecutors last 8 years or last 10 years. And the first reason we don't have female judges in Somaliland is an issue related in Islamic interpretation. We and our sheikhs and most of the community believe. Although personally I believe women can do that role, especially when our structure of the courts we have in Somaliland are two different types. We have a court and we have a system court and like 7 or 5 or 9 judges can make a one decision. So female judge can play important role in that and type of judges. And also we have another model of judges in Somaliland and countries which say community judges. Just they have a role of advice, but they don't have a role of decision. So even we fail to get that chance in our countries. And in fact, we need to get female judges if we want to answer and eliminate the domestic violence in our country. The domestic violence is very high, especially even this year, because COVID-19 contributed to the prevalence of that violence. And most of the women, they miss and lost their rights because of they don't have a female judge that they can share their true experience and problems. Because when, in fact, in a human being, when I'm girl or women, I can't give a full information to the men. But if I have a female judge, a female lawyer, or female prosecutor, it will help a lot. So it's a need and gap, and it's a very important need we need to get. But still, the first and last challenge we can't get that is a Islamic interpretation our sheikhs and Muslim community believe.
Thank you very much. And I think, the whole idea of having women judges is definitely connected to how people understand, their religion and their faith. The concept of guardianship, the concept of qawama and wilaya is very much dominating, how people see women. And that's really a challenge that the women movement should address. If women are able to support families and extended families, then definitely they are capable to assume the position of Qadi or of being a judge. Because if you are a headed household, if you make critical decisions, about your children, about your family, and you lead. And I think the Somali culture has women leadership, part of the culture, and women have been listened to, and they always, their opinions are valued. So those are all issues that I think the women movement could capitalize on. So thank you very much for answering this question. We have another question, which is speak about the, I will leave there is questions for SIHA. I'm going to leave them for, and I reflect on them at the end. And we still have a few minutes to go. So there is a question again about the youth and the new generation, and I'm going to ask Hebo to, I'll ask Sahra to answer that. And the question is basically focusing on how the new generations can participate on men and women on supporting the women movement. So Sahra, if you can answer that.
Sure. Thank you, Hala. I think one way, like a lot of youth and young people can participate in the women's movement is, thankfully, through technology. You don't really need to be like a full-time activist or an advocate or like work for an NGO. You could be like a business person. You could be just like a member of like a community, a neighborhood community, or just like a coalition of some sorts, whether it's the Welfare Association or like the Women's Journalism Association. So I think one way young people can participate in being active members of this women's movement is through technology and using social media to talk about, discuss issues that are important to women, or like that should be important nationally, but seem to be considered only important to women, whether it's like the quota bill or it is the sexual offenses bill. So I'm putting a lot of the responsibility on young people here, because if we do want to like make a change and make a difference here, then we really need to be more active in our involvements and more willing and generous with our time, and just more aware generally of what kind of bills are being passed, what kind of issues are being discussed, closed doors that we don't even should have access to. So we just need to knock on those doors, knock on every ceiling that is there, that's like built to kind of be a hurdle or a challenge to having women and like youth be access to those places and those offices and those desks.
Thank you so much, Zahra. I have a question for Nagat, and I was wondering, Nafisa, if you could give feedback to that. And the question about what's Nagat's strategy, to respond to the challenges that's currently the whole issue of women political participation is encountering. What does Nagat has any specific strategy or position at this point?
Thank you, Hala. We are working on women's political participation for the last 15 years now. And unfortunately, as the Maharaj said, when they rejected the quota for women on September 28 this year, we have another plan as we have experience in the male-dominated country that we are in now. There is the experience that we gained the local council in 2010 local council elections. When the local council elections come to close, they again removed the agenda for voting for women at that time, and there were women who are running on politics at that time. There were 146 women candidates, although 10 of them they won. And when they removed that agenda, we did not give up our hope. Women can continuously doing their the campaigns, and 10 of them they won at that time. Again, now we have Plan B, and you know, in Somaliland, the politics, we have democratization based on clan system, and women cannot come on politics because of clan issue. The clan leaders always they prefer men rather than women, and why we are now working. The woman who goes to their clan leaders, and first we have the only woman that they nominate the clan, their clan. She's very woman activist and she was sometime in, I think, 2005 Nagat chairperson, and she's on board now, and we are hoping the other women who can get their I think some of them also, they get some letters that they send the clan leaders, but still it's not like what the one gets to add. So we are working how women can get response from their leaders. And there is also another initiative that they sign 3 political parties, although it's not legal, but also it is somehow women who goes to political parties can come out within the party. So we are working on that 2 issues now, and the women aspirants and women candidates that we are training and also give us the chance how they can become a candidate and become a parliament or local council. They are still there, and also we have many women who have that ambition and we support them. There is another initiative, women can have a platform that they can discuss in how we can in kind and in cash support women who are willing to be part of the upcoming elections, both parliamentarian and local councils. There's many initiatives that we are doing, but it's a long way, you know, in Africa, and also in the context of Somalis, always in cultural barriers that still existing, but we can try our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nafisa, for that. And there is other questions from the audience, which is there is a question about the role on gender in disaster risk reduction and resilience, and I think this is you know, I mean, this is a really a critical question. I think you know, you cannot turn a blind eye to the impact of you know, of disasters on women and girls, you know, and you cannot see the gender you cannot turn a blind eye to the inequalities when it comes to the impact of disaster on you know, on society, and particularly on women and girls. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly reflects the struggle of women with you know, with the pandemic, which is a form of disaster. We have seen a lot of the economic impact has resulted in child marriage, has resulted in forced marriage, and and so on. So so we have all this impact. So in any interventions, when it comes to disasters management, I think we have to be extremely sensitive and aware on the impact of disasters and emerging situation on women. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to these questions, or I'm not sure, the video is turned off, but I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah. I think the video is turned off from your side. My video is on, so I don't know. Yeah. So yes, yeah, I can see you now, Nuradin. Yeah. So basically, there is a few questions that came back to SIHA, and I'd like to highlight some of them. So the first question: what's the role of SIHA in increasing women political participation or supporting women political participation in Somaliland? And I'd like to speak a little bit about what the SIHA think about the whole issue of women political participation and access to decision making. We simply does not think that women political participation and access to decision making should focus on representation alone. We think women participation should mostly be reflected on the agenda. This agenda being carried by women or by political organizations that involves men. And this is why we think it's, while we really emphasize the representation of women on the table and their presence, we don't think it's necessary reflects on women empowerment. We feel the struggle for women agenda will definitely lead to a fair women political and a true and meaningful women political participation. And this is why we have been pushing the women movement to adopt critical issues like, retaining young women and girls in education, women economic empowerment and access to resources, extending work to extending support to marginalized women, such as women street vendors and women within professional association, because we think that the agenda definitely it helps in mobilizing more women. And initially we have talked about the fact that women are over half of the country population. So this is, we have a great leverage. So I think what's really important for the women movement is to capitalize on that, and to bring more women into the platform of a struggle for women engagement. And how you do that? You do that by addressing the day-to-day struggle of women. If they are struggling economically, if they are struggling to keep their girls in schools, if they are struggling with accessing of the health system and so on. And specifically, I think the issue of girls' education is very, very critical because it's largely connected, to the resources invested on girls by the central government, and it reflects the lack of sensitivities of our governments, to the specific need of women. We are living in traditional societies. We require much more investment when it comes to women's health, when it comes to women's education. So I see how we strongly believe in the women movement investing more in the agenda, and we emphasize meaningful representation. So there is a question about our plans to continue supporting women street vendors. Of course, we are very much interested in supporting women in the informal sector. Absolutely. because based on research and based on statistics, over 80 or 85% of women across this region, they are active in the informal sector, and they need to be recognized. Their labor need to be recognized, and their contribution to the economy need to be recognized. Being women vendors, being domestic workers, being women who are working in marginal jobs that's not usually visible, cleaners, all kind of firewood collectors, all kind of work that women are doing to sustain societies. It should be recognized, and it's part of our agenda to continue supporting and working with these groups of women, and to change also the conversation and to change the agenda of our strategic partner, influence actually the agenda of our strategic partners to be able to see, those masses of women, because without them, we cannot move forward. So it's very important when building a movement to be able to see every woman based on their position and to address their needs and their priorities. And this is the challenges of building a movement. There is a question about our reaction to the rejection of the quota system as SIHA, and it's an ongoing struggle. I'll tell you something. When in my country, in Sudan, there used to be during our past regime before the change of government, we used to have over 30% of women in parliament, literally over 30% of women in parliament. But it was the worst regime that treated women ever. Women have been abused, violated, and their rights has been violated consistently. So my point is, having a large number of women in parliament does not necessarily reflect on improvement of women conditions. What really reflects on the improvement of women condition is having a very relevant agenda that work to support women. And I suggest, to my sisters in Somaliland, that, part of the strategies that we should all adopt is to identify allies within the political institution. While we were fighting for meaningful representation and participations and present within the decision-making institutions such as parliaments or House of Elders, we also need to fight to find allies who are going to carry our agenda forward. And also we need to connect our struggle for representation with agenda. And if we have women who wants to go to be nominated in parliament or in any of the local government levels, we need to support them to campaign around an agenda that matters to women. And this is very, very, very important. I don't think I have much to add into my response to the question. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give each of the panelists like 1 minute, to conclude, and then we are going to close our session. And since I can see you, Zahra, so I'm going to start with you. Zahra, you have 1 minute to conclude, and then we move to Asmahan, and then Hibo, and then we close our session.
Hey there, Hiba left because she had other commitments she needed to attend to. But Sinhan and I are here, so I'll start with my concluding remarks. I think it's important that the women's movement is inclusive of youth and women from different backgrounds and different communities in society. And to do so, we need to engage women street vendors, neighborhood committees, coalitions of women, and just like women associations, to make sure that this movement is truly comprehensive, it's truly inclusive, and representative of everyone in the society. So everyone's needs and interests can be addressed and be expressed in this way. And really quickly, I want to go back to, it was unfortunate to hear that 54% of girls between 15 and 24 are dropouts. It's really sad to hear that, but I do want to say that physically, there are more women and girls in schools and in colleges. There are more women in in work environments. There are more women here today than there are men. So despite the physical presence of women in our community, it is important to pay attention to those percentages, to those data, and to make sure that there are policies and strategies in place and commitments from the government to help support women, especially in women from rural areas, have access to education and have the resources that they need to be able to have access to just the educational and higher education institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I was told that Hippo has left, so we're going to move to Asmahan, and then we will close with Asmahan. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting all of you and in fact discussing these critical issues that women are facing, and we have it a lot and we and to share it with our younger generation who are now sitting here. When we started in this movement 2 decades, more than 2 decades ago, and it took us a long time, first of all, to build the capacity of our network members. And instead of broadening the movement. So it took us a long time, first of all, to invest on our member organizations to be able to work together with us and all of us, and be on board so that, we can then go down and to the grassroots and also, form this movement. It took us a long time, but finally, and thanks to God, now we succeeded that we have, put on board and many, and hundreds, thousands even now of grassroots women, who are not able to have a voice at that time, could speak of their, about their grievances, could, fend for their families, could have their own income, could have their decision making at the, household level. That was not, possible for them 10 years ago. But we have, succeeded to do that, and thanks to God, we have also succeeded to bring on board this younger generation who were not, many of them were not, born at that time when we started the movement. They were not born in 1997 and even in 1990, in 80, in the 80s when we started, this movement. So it's, a privilege for Nagat Network and other member organizations and networks, women networks in Somaliland, to have, succeeded in putting on board all stratas of women, Somaliland women together, be it, young, be it in middle age, be it old age like us who are now ready to hand over to the second generation. But we have, and we are, even if we are leaving for them an asset that they could, work on that and build on it, not to, just start something else or new, but they have, asset and they have, and you know, resource, everything that they could build on it. They could have, you know, initiatives, new blood, and, you know, add to what we have done. And I hope that will realize, inshallah, in the coming future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ismahan, for such a fantastic closing. I cannot say anything after that. I thank you all for your active participations, for showing interest. And I really, we are very, very grateful for this fantastic engagement. I hope that you will have the time to read the paper and to just, you know, to interact with it and to use the recommendations and to criticize it. And we are very happy to hear from you. And we look forward into our next meeting. I'm very, very happy that we were able to facilitate these virtual platforms, which will make our meetings and our ability to interact and see each other in the future quite possible. Thanks a lot and have a great day. All right. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.